All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am Ernest Chipman. I am the Vice President of Programs. Normally okay, thank you very much, everybody. Normally we have our president, Annette French, here with us to give you a welcome, and she is sorry that she cannot be here. And she hasn't any voice and she's sick. So I'm standing in for her. We do appreciate you being here for the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the state, Senate, and House candidates. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. Through education and advocacy, voters can influence public policy to make a positive impact on society. The League's mission is to help voters understand the process and power of voting. And basically that means that we do not support any particular candidate or any particular party. We do thank you, candidates. I know it's challenging to get in, but we appreciate you coming and participating in this forum. And for all of you that have made the effort to come tonight and attend this forum. We would also like to thank the Irving Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who has, and I know they are probably still navigating, that they're still navigating the parking lot probably as well.
Marion's here.
Oh, we are there.
She's here.
Okay, very good. Well, we'd like to thank you for your donation.
Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate it. Our moderator this evening is Dr. Alice Owen, and so I'm going to turn her over so that she can tell you how the event is going to go and what the rules are for the candidates. Alice.
Thank you, Christine. We really appreciate all the candidates being here tonight and our audience with us here on campus and also our audience at home. We will be recording this session and we would like to welcome all of you. We'd like to welcome all of you to the fall 2022 League of Women Voters candidates. And now I'd like to introduce our candidates. For Texas House District 103, we have Alejandro and he's running as an independent candidate. And Rafael Anchia, the Democratic candidate, is not able to attend tonight. For House District 105, Alan Meader is the Republican candidate, and Terry Mesa is the Democratic candidate. And then for Texas House District 115, Julie Johnson is the Democratic candidate, and the Republican candidate, Melissa Dennis, is unable to attend this evening. For Texas Senate District 16, Nathan Johnson is a Democratic candidate, and Brandon Copeland is a Republican candidate, and I think he's close. And for Texas Senate District 12, Francine Lee is the Democratic candidate, and Tan Parker, the Republican candidate, did not confirm his attendance this evening. We welcome the candidates and we thank you for being here. Now a little bit about our format this evening. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening and closing statements to tell the voters a little bit about themselves. And then they'll have 1 minute to answer each question that I pose to them. And guests may submit a writing question to any League member at any time. And we're collecting those on some index cards, so if you have some, we'd like to share those. And if we have time, that we'll try to include some of those questions during the forum. We do ask the audience to please refrain from making any noise or comments during the session as we are recording this. And now we'll begin with a 1 minute statement from the candidate. I know we're doing questions, so each candidate gets to start. So we'll start with Alejandro. Would you like to take your opening statement?
Yes, Neto Alejandro Arieta.
running as an independent in District 103. I'm a first generation American, mother's Dominican, father's Cuban. Other than that, and most importantly, I'm a father, single father to a beautiful daughter. She'll be 3 here in January. She's the impetus of my campaign, in large part why I'm running. There's an epidemic that's plaguing the nation and Texas. Per the Census Bureau, 1 in 3 children in America live in single parent or no parent homes. This is one of the leading causes of a lot of the societal issues that we see in society today. And that's one of my focuses of my campaign is to work on reversing this trend here in Texas. Thank you.
I didn't forget to mention our timekeeper. I want to introduce Chris Dobson, and she will remind our candidates, give them warnings if their time is running out. If she does have to put up the stop sign, that means your minute is up, so please wrap up your comments as soon as possible so we can move on to the questions. Appreciate it. Thank you. Ms. Mason, would you like to do your opening statement?
Good evening. Glad everyone could come. My name is Terry Mesa. I'm a 4th generation Irvingite, not just a 4th generation Texan, but a 4th generation Irvingite. I was born here. My mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother's here. So that in and of itself is not necessarily a reason to vote for someone, but it does mean that I'm invested in the community. That MacArthur High School is built on the back half of my grandparents' farm. So even though I'm a graduate of Irving High and MacArthur is always considered a rival, it wasn't when I went because it didn't have a senior class yet. But I still have a special feeling when I stand on the ground at MacArthur High School. So when I go to the legislature, I make a special point to represent the interests of Irving. The reason why I ran was because I didn't feel like that was being represented before. I joke that it's right there in the title, representative, and so I felt that we need someone who would truly represent the ideals and values of Irving residents, and I hope that I've done that in the 2 terms that I've served. Thank you.
The opening statements.
How are y'all doing tonight? My name is Alan Meager. I'm also a lifelong Irving resident, 60 years here in Irving. I've got 3 sons that are here. I've got one studying North Lake. I've got a middle one in the Navy, and my oldest one in Union Welding. So they're all doing pretty good. But I will tell you, I've served 16 years on the Irving City Council. I started in 2002, 2007, and then I came back in 2009 and served for this past May. Before that, I was a planning and zoning commissioner for 5 years. I have been very active in the city of Irving, and one reason I'm running is because I have been active. I've been out in the community. I go to almost every community event there is for the past 20 years. So I know what the residents want. It's nice to know and listen to the residents of Irving. And by being on the council and creating a budget every year, which we have to follow, you get to see the money that we need to get from the state to make our budget better and lower our property taxes and help our schools. That's the main thing. So I am running for House Rep to do that. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Julie Johnson, State Representative for House District 115, which is Addison, Farmers Branch, Carrollton, Coppell, and North Irving Valley Ranch. I'm running for my 3rd term, and I really focus on healthcare policy in the Texas legislature. I feel like we're in a healthcare crisis in this state. I'm an attorney by trade. I sit on the Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence as well as Appropriations. Article 2, which is the healthcare part of the state budget, and do a lot of work in that space and look forward to returning to those positions in the legislature next session, should I be reelected. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to visiting with you all tonight.
Ms. Lee, opening statement.
Hello, my name is Francine Lee. I'm running for Texas Senate District 12. As most of you may know, I am a first-generation Asian American. I came here as a child refugee, and we are very thankful to our community that has helped me realize the American dream, and I'm running because I want to give back to the community. It has given me back. It has given me so much. Thank you.
Johnson.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking an interest in all the races. I'm Nathan Johnson. I was elected in 2018, 4 years ago. This is my first re-election campaign. In 2 sessions, I've been most involved. First session in healthcare. I've done quite a great deal of work with Representative Johnson, Julie Johnson, funny last name coincidence. I've done a lot on our grid. I will continue to do a lot on our grid. We have another big problem facing us next session, and that is 27 billion extra dollars to spend. It's going to take some sober minds to do that productively. It's challenging, but I do think that Texas has so many things going for it. We should be embarrassed if we squander it. And I think that the depth to which we've sunk in our cultural war silliness is interfering with our ability to take care of things like schools and roads and health and many other things that are essential to our daily existence here with a American $2 trillion economy with $250 billion budget. So I'm looking forward to getting back there and working on things that matter and pushing aside the things that don't.
Thank you very much, Chris. We're going to start with our first round of questioning. And Ms. Mason, I'm going to start with you for this first question. I'll go down the aisle, and then we'll rotate who gets to start first. What 3 issues are going to be your top priorities when you serve this next time?
Well, as some of you may already know, I started off my young adult life as a teacher. I've taught every level from kindergarten to sophomore level college. Sophomore level college included right here at North Lake. So it wouldn't be any big surprise to know that education would be one of my priorities. And then having a son who goes to college also means that for college being more affordable. When I went to college, it was under tuition regulation, and my father, who was a barber, could wait at the end of the registration line, and when I checked out, he could write a check to the university for my college education. It wasn't that my father was rich, it was that college was that affordable. So I want to make college affordable again, support for public education, and of course, expanding Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare in Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What are the 3 issues that would be your top priorities when you serve?
Number 1 is public safety. We need to make sure that our public safety is fully funded. As you all know, we all depend on them 100%, whether it's police or fire, they save your life. They did save my life, a heart attack over there, came in the hospital within 23 minutes in. So we must fully fund it. The other thing is public education, or all education basically. We need to make sure the teachers have the money and the resources to teach. So many times I hear from teachers that they're not teaching anymore. There's so much red tape involved and they're giving up. We need to make sure our teachers are paid properly and they have the funds and the curriculum to teach. The other thing is healthcare. We need to continue to improve our healthcare in the state of Texas to make sure everybody's covered.
Ms. Johnson, what are your top 3 issues?
Well, I think we're probably going to hear the top 3 from all of us because the state is in an education crisis. The state needs to increase its allotment so that we can help lower the pressures on our school property taxes. The state must pay more than what we're paying. We have a revenue surplus. I would like to actually pass our Medicaid expansion bill with Senator Johnson. We have the largest number of uninsured people in the state of Texas. We have the highest rate of maternal mortality. We have more women dying after childbirth than in any other state in the country. There's a lot of critical work to be done in the healthcare space. And I think, those issues in particular meet the priorities of our state. And, to Representative Mason's point, funding our teacher retirement. That's a bill that Democrats have offered every single time, and the Republicans have not passed it. And hopefully, maybe this time we can get it passed.
Ms. Lee, your top 3 priorities?
I believe that the top 3 are women's reproductive health, our children's safety, and climate change.
It's a shame I can't name 20 things because there's 20 things that are important, but I will give you 2 or 3 very large ones. Of course, we need to expand Medicaid in the state. In addition to all the gloomy real statistics that Representative Johnson mentioned, we also stand most to gain. We get pick up about $100 way our federal dollars are coming back to Texas. We paid 238,000 jobs, 1 million people health insurance, family financial stability, and actually we've seen that Medicaid expansion lowers crime. So I think we can move on with that thing done finally. Another major issue is our grid, right? A lot of great work was done last session, but we have a long ways to go, and we need to make sure two things happen with the grid. Number one, the next big catastrophe, whether it's a storm or a terrorist attack or whatever it is, we don't know what's coming. We need to have critical facilities backed up and ready to go. The second thing about the grid is we need to make sure that we can generate enough electricity. Finally, I've got 5 seconds left. Our government is weak, feeble, underfunded. It can't do what it's supposed to. It's big, it's invasive, it's ugly, but it cannot deliver the services we need. We need to put some of that $27 billion surplus into state salaries and some new infrastructure.
Yes, like Senator Johnson, I have more, but my top 3. First one is family court reform. A lot of issues in family court that definitely need to be addressed. Another issue is term limits. My opponent is not here today, but he's seeking his 10th term in office, and I guess another tie to that family court. There was legislation last session that would have allowed children of divorce equal access to fit and able parents that he blocked on the House floor, which is large part why I'm running. Property taxes is another focus. That's something that's affecting everyone. Everything's going up today, everything except incomes. So trying to reform taxes and provide some relief to folks. Those are the 3 of the major points that I'd like to address. Thank you.
Mr. Meager, I'll start with you for this next question. Do you believe that the 2 major parties have moved further from the center? And if so, how would you promote compromise and not division?
Can you repeat the question and talk louder?
We can't hear you.
Do you believe that the 2 major parties have moved further from the center? And if so, how would you promote compromise and not division?
It's nice to ask that question, because that's one thing that I would like to do or work with. Being on the city council the past 16 years, we've had Republicans and Democrats, but we worked together for a win-win situation. We didn't say we were party affiliated, we're going to draw the line right here. The only way we can really make our government work is to have the parties work together. Instead of having far right and far left, let's work together, let's get it done. Let's not draw a party line and say, you're going your way, you're not going to listen to the other person. And I will tell you, I admire Senator Johnson here, because in the past, when we did Austin, he sat down and talked to us. He took the time. I admired that very much. And one thing that I have talked about is we need to break those lines. We do. We need to be able to work together. And that's one thing I would look forward to doing and look forward to seeing, because I like to work with people for a win-win situation at all times. So, thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, we definitely have partisan issues in the Texas legislature, but the bulk of what we do is nonpartisan. And in fact, a lot of the common divides are more rural versus urban. It's been a very interesting phenomenon to me. I work in a very bipartisan manner. I do agree that our parties are too polarized. The politics of the left and the right in our primary structure is really driving members out to the edges, which is unfortunate. But my politics are to the left and center. And just by exemplified of the Medicaid expansion bill, I had 9 Republicans sign on to my bill, worked very hard in meeting with my colleagues to educate them on why Medicaid expansion is good for their district. I had the Republican votes to pass that bill by working in a bipartisan way. And the majority of what we do and I've passed has been in a bipartisan fashion. So it can be done, it's just not publicized as often as the more polarized issues.
I am a coordinator, so I work for the courts. I have a lot of litigants that comes before me. So it's not unusual for me to work with opposite end of the adverse party and try to get them to come together. So I do not believe that it changes from being just a court coordinator. If I'm elected as the state senator, I don't have a problem working across the aisle, bringing everybody together.
Well, the first half of the question is, do I agree that both parties have drifted further from the center? And I don't want to talk about national politics because I don't have time to watch that show. I would say that throughout history, we have periods of time when one party goes a little crazier than the other one, and it can vary by location, it can vary by time. But right now, I'm going to say it. I think the Republican Party has abandoned traditional Texas Republican values, leaving a lot of moderate, good, sensible people with no place to go politically. Democrats, sure, there's some far left ideas. Some of them are good. There's some far right ideas that are good sometimes. But no, I don't think it's equal. This is not everybody's equally crazy all the time. Absolutely not. I think it has gone way far right. I think the Democrats on the state level actually are working pretty well in the Senate. We've got a lot of Republican friends who we work with who are sensible. And when we talk about something like Medicaid expansion or reproductive rights, those shouldn't be left issues. Anybody going to say we move too far left because we want to expand Medicaid? That's nonsense. That's centrist. No, I don't think we've gone too far left. Will I work with my colleagues? I passed 57 bills in 2 sessions. I love working with my Republican colleagues, and I will continue doing it.
Did you read the question?
Do you believe that the two major parties have moved further from the center? And if so, how would you promote compromise and not division?
Yes, this is one of the major reasons why I'm running independent. In my heart of hearts, I feel like we all have more things in common than we know. And those are the things that I'm trying to focus on. I left some flyers out there, out front. If you look at the points that I'm looking on, I'm trying to find those issues that need reform, that there's support on both sides to reform and focus on. So yes, again, that's why I'm running independent. Thank you.
Could you double my time? I sit on the Pub Ed Committee, Public Education. I'm proud to say that of all the committees in the state legislature, that has to be the one that rules or governs with the least amount of partisanship. The Republicans are on the committee, of course, they're the majority because they're the majority of the House, but they are Republicans who have served as superintendents, who have served as school board members, who have served as principals. And so together, our common goal, whether we're Republicans or Democrats on public education, is what's best for the students, what's best for the teachers, what's best for our public schools. I also served on agriculture, which is kind of odd because Irving's not exactly an agriculture committee. There's not anything too Republican or Democrat about crops or cows. I think the culprit is primaries, because when we have to run in a primary, we have to appeal to our base to win in order to go on to the general election. So our primaries are the culprit, and our Republican colleagues are so afraid of being primary that they're unable to vote to even their own consciences on bills.
Thank you all. Ms. Johnson, I'm going to start with the next question with you. And this is a 3-part question. What role should state government play in the management of school and public libraries? And how do you think state government can do anything to reduce the number of teachers leaving the profession?
I got 2 parts on that.
I know you do.
Okay. Well, I don't believe the state government should regulate the content of school libraries. I think that's what we have local school boards. I think we have the State Board of Education. We elect competent people who are experienced in state curriculum and educational curriculum and what's appropriate in those roles and those positions. It's one of the things that they're expected to do. And I don't think that many of the members in the state legislature are trained or qualified in school curriculum. And so that's why we have state boards of education, and that's why we have school boards. With respect to teachers, we need to treat them with dignity. We need to give them the resources. We need to quit micromanaging them. We need to quit telling them how to teach. They're professionally trained. We need to pay them a salary commensurate with the important role that they serve. And we need to keep them safe. And we're not doing any of those things as a state. And so once we start stepping up, we have to put our money where our mouth is in terms of taking care of our teachers and prioritizing them and giving them freedom to teach and do the jobs that they have been hired to do.
Public libraries.
With regards to what government should do in public education, I would leave that up to our qualified professional educators. Like Julie said, there's school boards, there's, and you don't need the government telling you what to do there. As for libraries, as a child refugee, someone who did not learn English until the age of 9, I believe that reading is extremely, extremely important to our children, for them to grow as a person, as an individual. And when you take that out, you stop them from growing in that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to steal Julie's answer. I think that expressed everything. I want to express minus one other thing, since I've got another 45 seconds I'll add. Let's look again at the concept of limited government. Sometimes that means you know your lane. In states that are over-governed, you sometimes see layers of government stepping up on each other and no one can get anything done. I don't want to go down that road. And when we got legislators who are trying to fix the grid and expand healthcare, I don't think we have time to figure out exactly what it looks like being a library, and we shouldn't either, because we do elect good people to do that. Secondly, as far as teaching the teachers better, did you all know that there is no paid parental leave for school teachers? Can you think of a group of people who more would deserve paid parental leave, who better understand kids because they're out raising kids of their own? I'm going to use legislation or work with the budget or figure out some way that we can get paid parental leave for our teachers so they can start having the overall area of respect in school.
I'll repeat the question again. What role should state government play in the management of school libraries and public libraries? And do you think the state government can do anything to reduce the number of teachers leaving the profession?
Yes, so in terms of material, this campaign, my campaign is largely focused on children and ensuring that we have parents involved. I'd like to see parents more involved and getting involved at the school board level and seeing those discussions taking place there to determine what's proper and not proper in terms of curriculum that is being given to our kids. In terms of teachers leading the profession, yes, we've come to the point where we're expecting anything and everything from our teachers, for them to play security, counselor, teacher, and everything in between. I'd like to see more mentors, more parents involved in the schools. I'd like to see more mental health professionals, create a board of mental health professionals so that we can get them involved in schools and also make them not available just to our students, but also to our teachers.
I believe in local control. I think the state tries to take way too much control, not only from our Irving city government, but also from our public schools. We need to trust our teachers, and we need to trust our librarians. They're trained, we need to believe in them. That's part of the reason why there's a drain, is because feeling over-regulated, over-administrated, someone looking over their shoulder, constantly telling them every move to make. So I think that would help go towards our teachers being happier in schools. We don't do it just for the money. There's something that's called a teacher tax, and that's the tax that we pay when we graduate from college and choose to be a teacher. We automatically make less than our colleagues, graduates who choose another profession. So we already have a teacher tax. We don't teach for the money, but they still need to be well paid. And as I mentioned to you, I sit on public education. That means that not only during the legislative session am I on pub ed, but I've been meeting over and over again, month after month, during the interim with pub ed meetings in Austin. And so we're working on these very issues that you asked about.
Thank you. First of all, as far as our libraries go, I believe the state really needs to stay out of it. We do elect a school board and superintendent, and they should have the right to choose what's in there. Because the parents, the citizens of the city that elect them, go to these school board meetings. They go there and they voice their opinions. The state needs, in my opinion, needs to stay out of a little bit more than they are right now. I like a little less government. Yeah, there's no point in hiring a school or electing a school board and superintendent if they have no power. The state overrules everything they do. You have the right to vote who you want and have proper representation at that level. As far as the teachers go, the mandates that are given by the state, they need to be fully funded. And a lot of teachers that I've talked to that are leaving professions because they don't have time to teach anymore. They're testing, they're doing other things, they're going home, they're tired, they're exhausted. They want to teach the children. That's why they got into teaching. They want to teach. They don't want to have to do all the curriculum that is required on a daily basis. That really is redundant and it's not helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson? You started. Thank you all. My next question, and this is similar to a question that we got from a member of the audience too. So start with Ms. Lee on this one. What would you do to ensure our children are safe in school, and what gun control measures, if any, do you support?
I believe that to keep our kids safe, we gotta have stricter gun control. I'm not here to take your gun away, but there gotta be some regulation, such as red flag law, or even, background checks, extensive background check, extra, 3 days, 72-hour hold. I don't think that is outrageous. It's not, our kids' lives are at stake, and I believe that these little exception is worth it.
It's really a very, very difficult problem, and it alarms me that we have a lot of people who believe that we're going to create these impenetrable forces to keep our children safe, and I'm all for having locked doors, tight security, doing everything we can to keep kids safe in school. But let's face the cold reality that if someone's hell-bent on mowing down a bunch of kids with a machine gun, they're going to find a way to do it. Now, we'll do everything to prevent that from happening easily, but if you really want to prevent it, we're going to have to back up quite a bit. We're going to have to back up to first grade or second grade or third grade and identify kids that are having trouble, mental trouble, so they don't grow up to be homicidal when they're 18. We can have a culture that doesn't encourage a lust for guns and blood. We can have a culture just send little signals, like a red flag, like delayed time of having a better background check, and sort of change the culture. But we do live in a hostile environment, and we have to face that, and do not delude ourselves into thinking that a different pane of glass or a metal detector is going to keep the kids safe. We need to be alert and look back further in time and make our society less violent.
Things that I would like, I'm in favor of background checks. Social media, I think that should be a component as well. This issue on family court reform and what I'm focusing on, a lot of these children that you do see involved in these shootings, unfortunately, do come from these homes where they don't have adequate access to both parents. Another thing I'd like to do is there's unfortunately negative stigma around mental health. I'd like to, use money from programs such as Title 4D to start training mental health professionals and make them available to students and teachers so that we can identify these issues early on. Have some competency programs as part of our criminal reform programs as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. I come from a military family. From my father in World War II, to all three of my older brothers all served in the military. Army, Coast Guard, and Navy. My mother said, thank God my fourth child's a girl, I won't lose her to the military. And I married ROTC right out of college at UT Arlington and got hauled off to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where shortly after being there as a young newlywed, just about 23 years old, was programmed into. So every time he got deployed, which was frequently on a 90-day deployment, he loaded the shotgun and put it above the bed before he left. So I do believe in our right to protect ourselves from an intruder in our home. We have a right to defend ourselves with deadly force if necessary, but I don't believe the answer to guns is more guns. I do believe in common sense gun legislation, like universal background checks, red flag laws, and other bills like that I think that we can, and lowering the age for assault weapons, raising the age of assault weapons from 18 to 21. And I think those are the ones that we can get bipartisan support on in the next legislative session. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What would you do to ensure our children are safe in school, and what gun control measures, if any, do you support?
Okay, about the children being safe in school. First of all, City of Irving, several years ago, we started a group for I guess, mental health unit, and we have mental health professionals along with police officers that make visits to the homes. We need to get that more involved in our school district. When there is a child or a student that, say, the public resource officers or a teacher has a little concern about, they need to visit the student at home with the parents. We need to start at a young age and stop from there. One thing that's changed since when I was in school is video games. There's so many violent video games out there where they sit at home and they're more introverted than extroverted. They don't get out on the bike and ride and talk to everybody. They sit on computer games. So we need to get our teachers, we need to have the proper training for resource officers, everybody to look and see what the red flags are before this gets started. We need to help the kids out and put them on a brighter path. And as far as safety in the school, yes, we need the resource officers. We do need to do whatever it takes to our children's safe. That is a safe place.
You know, public safety and school safety and guns is a multifaceted approach. It's similar to what Senator Johnson was saying. You have to back up. There's multiple lines. It's putting up as many roads of impediment as possible. So you do early intervention. We have to have much increased mental health funding. We have to intervene in troubled kids earlier. We have to restrict access. We need red flag laws. When people are troubled, when parents are troubled, they know their kid is suffering, to be able to call and intervene police to get help, to stop, to prevent. We've got to do that. We need to have domestic protective orders in place, enforcement of guns there. My son is 19. He is no more competent to have an AR-15 than he is a pack of cigarettes or he is a six-pack of beer. Raising the age to 21 across the board is a common sense thing. And then we need to make sure that our schools are hardened and are safe. And that, like, I have an elementary school in my district that doesn't have any doors on it, and teachers are very upset about it. We need to at least give the resources in place to make it as difficult as possible at every level for these tragic events to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to start the next question with you. Regarding children, according to the Houston Chronicle, nearly 2,000 employees have resigned from the Texas Child Protective Services since January, leaving the agency in crisis. What do you think should be done?
Y'all may remember from my opening statement that I mentioned feeble government. Enfeebled government. We have, for the past decade, required agencies to do more with less funding every single session. You have to come in with a cut while our population skyrockets, while our revenues skyrocket, while the economy grows, we're supposed to do less. And over time, what we've seen is agencies like CPS and the Texas Juvenile Justice Department are paying, I think, $17 an hour. You can make about $16.50 at Buc-ee's nearby. And they're dealing with some of the most difficult issues any professional can possibly have to deal with. They are quitting because they're paid almost nothing. They're trying to do double what they're able to do, and it's driving them to the brink. And this, they don't have the resources they have. They don't have the software they need. They don't have the physical facilities they need. We need to invest money in these people and in these places. And guess what? We have it. And when we don't invest the money, it ends up costing more later. So it's not an easy fix, but the answer is simple.
Mr. Reardon.
There's definitely a lot of reform that's needed within CPS. I have a friend, he's a pastor in East Texas, and for over a year he was trying to adopt a child for themselves and for their son. I want their son to have a sibling. For over a year, just the whole process for them to go through and to get approved, it got to the point where they gave up. This CPS place where the children are being held at, it was at 3 times the capacity of what it should be at. And also, CPS in terms of family court, we'll go back to that. A lot of times it's being abused by parents just to, play this, what I call the proverbial Hunger Games, in terms of trying to take away time from other parents and other things. So a lot of reform is needed in CPS more, and I can discuss here in a minute. So thank you.
I have a front row seat. I serve on Human Services, and I've served on Human Services for 4 years. The charge for Human Services is to oversee these agencies, Family and Protective Services, Child Protective Services. I've asked that we have a box of clinics put in each of our chairs, and they still haven't done it because it's really a tear-jerking committee to serve on, for me anyway. We have people who drive from all over the state of Texas for hours. Now, unlike other committees, you don't see that in like business or industry or something that's got people who work, but individuals who come to put a face to their story, to tell their personal story about what they're going through. We've done a terrible job in Texas in taking care of our children that are entrusted in our care, including foster children. We've been under a court mandate for years, and for most of that time, we've wasted it being defensive, kind of like, no, we're not doing anything wrong. Rather than saying, well, okay, let's see what we can do to correct the problem. I think we're just now turning the corner to where we're saying we have to look and see what we can do to correct the problem, but we've wasted so much time. We need to take care of the children who are entrusted to us.
As we know, times have changed since we were kids. Single parent households, both parents working with inflation. A lot of things have changed with the gas prices. When we look at what we have at CPS, we need more employees. And I don't like to compare it with this, but being at the city of Irving, we have a couple of departments that have affected everybody in this room where we can't keep employees. They're not paid enough. We train them. We pay them a certain dollar amount. We train them, and then they go get another job that they make twice the amount of money. And one of the most recent ones is our garbage. Our garbage pickup. We have to go 1 day a week because we can't keep employees. The same thing with CPS. Until you fund these organizations properly, get them the money, get them the training, get them the equipment they need, you're not going to keep the employees. And we need to do that. This is one of the issues the state should take on and not do the smaller things that are messing with the cities. We need to get this right because there's too many people out there that are single parents that need help. There's a lot of kids out there whose parents really don't care about them anymore. Once they turn 16 or 17, there's nothing going on in the house. I mean, I know we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes, CPS has been sued and been held in contempt. Not only did they have a judgment against the state, the state's been held in contempt for not following through on that by not funding our CPS program. We have CPS workers. What we're expecting of them, we don't have enough placements. The bureaucratic red tape for people to adopt and foster care is outrageous. We don't have enough placements. As a result, we have kids living in offices who then have to go stay in a hotel room, and we're expecting that CPS worker to go and spend the night and be the caregiver for multiple children in a hotel room so that they're not sleeping on the floor of an office building. That's untenable. And that is Greg Abbott by not prioritizing funding for our CPS and the most vulnerable kids that the state has undertaken an obligation to care for, and it must change.
I'm going to echo what Senator Johnson and Representative Johnson said. We have to properly fund these agencies so that they are not overworked and underpaid for them to take care of children in the detention center and under CPS cares.
Mr. Kirkland, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. Thank you for being able to join us. Would you take a minute to introduce yourself? Mr. Kirkland is running for Texas Senate District 16, and then I'll repeat the question for you.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize for being late. I came over from another event, but I got here as quick as I could. So I'm happy to be joining the conversation, I guess about halfway through. Like was mentioned, I'm also running for Texas Senate District 16 as a Republican nominee. And I have to say, I am very glad that we can have conversations about policy, serious conversations. Because what we've seen in the past 4 years is a significant move towards polarization and the breakdown of conversation on these important issues.
Thank you. And here's the question that they've been answering. According to the Houston Chronicle, nearly 2,000 employees have resigned from Texas Child Protective Services since January, leaving the agency in crisis. What do you think should be done?
Well, I think there's many reasons that we're seeing people leave our agencies, not just CPS. We've seen a lot of municipalities that are struggling with staffing. There's staffing problems all across our government. Within CPS specifically, I think that part of it has to do with how those employees are being treated. And a lot of times, what we see is that in our government agencies, the employees are really not well respected, and they're not given given leeway to do their job in an effective manner. They're being held back and restricted, and that's very frustrating. And I think a lot of that frustration has led to greater resignations, but a lot of it does have to do with the economy in general. We're in a very bad economy right now.
Thank you very much. I did want to remind you, we have a timekeeper here. One minute per question. Thank you. My next question, I'm going to combine it with a question from the audience because they're fairly similar. The next question, I'll start with Mr. Ariata. Do you feel any election reforms are needed to protect access to voting? And the second part is, how can you get young voters to the polls? Because they're feeling very discouraged.
In terms of voter reform, I mean, one thing I'd like to see is automatic voter registration when you get your license or things like that. In terms of young voters, I think one easy thing that we can do is make it easier for third parties like myself to get on ballots. Doing things like that, I think everyone's in favor of having options. Options ultimately, I think, is one way to have a greater inclusion of people and ideas. And is another reason why I'm in big favor and why it's a large component of my campaign is term limits. So I think these are all ways that we can bring young people in. It's just by finding ways to have greater ideas and more ideas to be talked about. Thank you.
I think I've been what you might call prolific in filing election reform bills, both in 2019 and 2021, filing somewhere between 10 and 12 bills, anywhere from same-day voter registration, online voter registration, expanding the kinds of IDs that are accepted, ranked choice voting, lots of different things to make voting easier and more accessible. What a lot of people don't realize is that when we file bills, that doesn't mean that they get heard. There's a committee chair who is all powerful, and whether that bill gets heard, the committee doesn't even know about it, just the committee chair. And so both sessions, we had committee chairs that whenever you talked about making voting easier, the walls, the fence walls went up, like voter fraud, voter fraud. Associating making voting easier and more accessible with making voting easier to be fraudulent. And so unfortunately, none of those bills got heard. But we're going to keep trying to make election reform. I do believe that we should have everybody have the right to vote. What we have in Texas is not a problem with ineligible people voting. We have a problem with eligible people not being allowed to vote.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What do you feel any election reforms are needed to protect access to voting? And how would you get young voters to the polls?
First of all, it's pretty easy to vote. All you have to do is get registered, and it is the fact of getting people out to vote once they are registered. 270,000 people within just the city limits of Irving, Texas, and city elections, you get 15,000 people voting. And state elections, 60,000 people vote. It's very easy. You have a driver's license, you walk in and show it, and you can vote. And it is very easy. Now, as far as getting the youth out to vote, there's 2 or 3 ways to do it, and I've talked to my kids about it. First, I'll get into the government classes in high school, get here with North Lake, get the government classes to talk to them, tell them the importance and to make a decision. And every vote does count. People do not realize that they think, oh, my vote didn't count. I did have one election where I won by 1 vote. And I'll tell you, I had to tell everybody, every single vote counts. So when people tell you that their vote doesn't count, you tell them, yes, it does. And all you have to do is talk to the kids. I have a lot of young people I work with. I said, get out and vote. I said, why? I said, because you make a difference. Don't complain if you don't vote. So, thank you.
Well, I disagree. I think voting is somewhat challenging in the state. We need to make it, it's difficult to register to vote. You can't register online. You have to print off a piece of paper and then mail it in. We're in an online world. That makes no sense. There's this arbitrary deadline by which you have to register by. If you're an eligible voter in the state, you should be able to vote, just in the case it is in many, many states across this country. We don't make the hours workable for many voters. You know, a lot of voters work, they don't get off in time. They work all day. They have to pick their kids up. The polls close at 7. Why don't we have some extended hours days to where people can work? And then, you know, the Republicans shut down mobile voting, which is being able to take eligible voting sites into communities that don't have access to the votes for maybe a weekend. Say, hey, a senior community, here's a polling location for you to go cast your ballot, and be able to move it around in an efficient manner. No, they said it has to stay open the entire time in order to count, which is not sustainable in a lot of the resources. So I think there's a lot that we can do to make voting more accessible. Having voting locations on every college campus.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I think your time is up.
As a community leader, community activist, what I've done is have an internship program for our youth and place them in elected officials' offices and let them witness firsthand what it's like to work for a state legislature and why, in the end, when the election time comes, their vote counts because they're working for someone that they will be voting for or may not, depending on what the circumstances is. So that's a good way to increase voter turnout among youth. As for the difficulty, I do see what, I'm going to echo what Representative Johnson is saying. There is a lot of difficulty in registering to vote. In the age of modern technology, the way they're doing it is archaic.
I don't know how to get young people to vote. As soon as I figured out, I'm keeping it a secret. No, I'm not going to keep it a secret. Everybody's been trying to figure out how to get young people to vote. I hope they vote a lot more. As far as do we need laws or reforms to try to fix our election system, then we spent a lot of time last session causing damage to public faith in the electoral process. My main problem with the elections bill was not so much the things that it did, but it sent this narrative out there that our elections are fraught with fraud, which is nonsense. They're not fraught with fraud. Nevertheless, the bill passed. What should we do now? Yes, of course, we should have online voter registration. I did try to amend the big bad voter bill, election bill, last session with an online voter amendments that it didn't quite carry, but he knew it was right. So we should pursue that. As far as the big picture, I really think that this is a gigantic state with very different areas, and we think we ought to have a little bit more local control over our elections. The city of Houston designed a lot of innovative things to try to get their population to vote. It's different than it is in Lufkin, it's different than it is in El Paso or Dallas, and each local area knows best how to accommodate its citizens. I think we ought to
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
What as we do with the election bill that was passed in the last session, we actually made it easier to vote and extended voting hours. And I think that has become and will continue to become easier to vote. The problem is that people don't know how to do it and they don't know where to go. So when it comes to, they're not being educated. This is a problem with our education system. It starts in our schools with teaching government. It starts with getting young people and encouraging them to participate in the process and show them that they can actually make a difference by getting involved. And I think a great way to do that is to encourage young people to not only vote across party platforms, across both parties, but also to encourage them to get involved on the actual candidate side and actually run for office and do things that get them to encourage other young people to also get involved. That's where the biggest impact is, when young people are encouraging other young people.
Thank you very much. My next question, I'm going to combine one from the audience with one we had. It's similar to one we had. So, Ms. Mason, I'll start with you on this one. With the Supreme Court returning the abortion issue to the states, and in Justice Thomas's opinions, he laid out some other provisions that might.
This is dangerous big government, and we should not tolerate it.
Well, I think the topic of abortion is very tough because, on the one hand, you have women that have to go through significantly challenging change to their bodies when they become pregnant. At the same time, you have a child that is in the womb at that point. And I think we have to look at the science and consider the science, and also look at it from any standard of morality. From the point of conception, you have a unique, functional human life. And I think it's important to protect that life. That's the science. That's the reality. It has a unique set of DNA, potentially unique blood type, and given the natural process, it will become a full human being. And so I think that we must protect life. That is very important. Thank you.
Mr. Mann?
Yes, I've been doing lots of door knocking, and this is probably one of the issues that I hear the most while I'm out there. Ultimately, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and the Supreme Court gave this to the states to decide. I know Republicans that are pro-choice, I know Democrats that are pro-life. And ultimately, what I'd like to see is what 6 other states have already done, and to have this issue put on the ballot. I believe in strong democracies, and I believe in the power of women. So put this issue on the ballot and let the people decide, let the people of Texas decide where we should land on this. One thing I will say is that with these abortions, I talked about how we had 1 in 3 children being raised in single parent or no parent homes. We also talked about this issue with CPS reform. What we will see is we're going to see more children going into these broken CPS programs, and more children being born in single parent homes. Thank you.
Mr. Meeker, I'm going to start with you on this question. What should be the state's role in border security, and how would you handle the humanitarian crisis at the border?
I believe the state has to do what they have to do. We need the federal government to come in here and step in. But if the federal government will not step in, the state needs to. We need to secure our borders. And we need to do what we can to get it from the federal government. But the state needs to secure our borders. There's too much trafficking going on across, whether it's human trafficking, drug trafficking, or anything else. There's too many people dying as they're coming across our borders illegally. We need to make it easier for those that want to come over legally. Cut some of the red tape. If they want to, make it where they can actually apply and get over here. Because there's so much red tape, there's so many ways they can't do it. They're crossing illegally. They're losing lives every day crossing illegally. We have to make it, I'm not saying easy, I don't want to make it easy, but I want to make it easier, and where they will try instead of risking their lives to come in the United States. But I do agree, we need to shut the border down, we need to block it down, and we need to see and control who is coming across our borders at this time.
The border security has been a problem for the last 30 years. I remember when President George Bush offered a comprehensive immigration bill. And our federal government has failed across multiple presidencies, multiple Congresses to address this issue, and it needs to be. We have to ease the process for people to come legally and to stay here legally. The biggest problem we have with illegal immigration is people whose visas have expired because they can't come back for 15 years practically. What if they leave and they have children here? Or people who are working here. One of my wife's partners, it took her 16 years to get her citizenship as a physician in this country. That's not tenable. We need to create worker opportunities. We need to give people guest worker passes. We have a worker shortage. We have a huge supply issue of workers in our agricultural process and construction and many other opportunities. We have a lot of people that are just trying to come here to work and provide for their families, and we need to create opportunities for that to happen so that we can, Matt, I'm out of time, but we could talk about this for a long time.
I feel like I'm harping on this. I was at the refugee camp. We waited until our paperwork came through, and I'm very thankful that we were accepted by the U.S. There were an international community that came to our rescue, helping all the refugees at Thailand to help them find a new home. And I believe that that is doable if we bring in the international community to come out and try, instead of trying to do this all by ourselves.
I think Francine's made an excellent point about the international community. Julie made a great point about the fact that it's really a half century of failed U.S. policy and neglect towards the border. We have simultaneously with economic problems in Latin America, we have kind of a collapse of political systems in Latin America, and people are fleeing because you go to Venezuela under totalitarian, communist rule essentially. It's collapsing. They're coming here for a better life, and we're not going to shut that down by a couple of visits to the border or saying something. Meanwhile, we got Republicans out there talking, the border's open, Biden opened the border. No wonder they're coming here. Everyone's telling them the border's open. The border is more secure than it has ever been in our history. However, we do have a problem at the border, and it is the Texas border, and it does warrant some Texas dollars, and it does warrant some Texas law enforcement. It does warrant some technology. It's okay that we spend money there. It's appropriate that we spend money, but we should be partnering with the federal government and partnering with Latin American countries to try to manage the situation, tripling the number of courts, building more facilities down there, treating people better. We have to address it, but we got to do it the right way.
The border is open. I know he says it's not, but we've had over 2 million border encounters in the past year. That's more than all of the Trump presidency combined. All 4 years. That's happened just in the past 7 months. 2 million. With that, we've seen a dramatic increase in fentanyl pouring across our border. We've seen a dramatic increase of human trafficking. Now, this is not the responsibility of the states to secure the border. It's the responsibility of the federal government. But it's our communities that are being affected, and we have to take responsibility. We have to put more resources on the border with our law enforcement officers to stop this humanitarian crisis that's taking place. And I think we also have to, at the same time, reform our immigration system. Because something that we can agree on, I think, is that a lot of people that are coming here are trying to get here because they want to build a better life for themselves. They want to participate in a free country, a democracy. So we have to reform that citizenship process and the curriculum process where people need to come here.
Yes, so the truth is our economy is dependent upon these migrant workers. What we have is a supply and demand issue, and the demand is high. Ultimately, it's the federal government that needs to pass reform so that we can reform this. I'd like to see something. A lot of these folks that are crossing the border, they're paying $10,000 go back and forth. Maybe we create some kind of ID program where we can ID these folks. A lot of folks come in, send money back to their families, wherever they're at. Maybe we have some temporary employment centers in these other countries so that we know who's coming and we have some kind of screening process. And instead of that money going to, the 10,000 to these cartels, maybe that's money that can be coming into our government. Thank you.
Yes, there is an issue at our border, but we don't talk much about the causes of it and addressing the causes. We just try to address what's happening. And what we've been doing is pretty much since the state of Texas role in immigration, which we're really not supposed to have that much of a role since immigration is a federal issue, but we are talking about our state. But what we've been doing is mostly political theater. National Guard has no power, no authority to do anything to any immigrant who crosses. They're just there for bluff, for show, so the immigrants will be intimidated when they see somebody in a National Guard uniform. They have no authority to stop anybody or arrest anything. Anyway, same thing with all the DPS that we send to the border. No authority to stop anybody, no authority to arrest anybody unless it's for the usual things that a DPS would stop someone for, like a ticket or something. So they're more or less protecting ranch lands from immigrants trespassing across it. And it causes more problems because when they get arrested for that, they can go back and come back again. But if they go through the immigration process, then they're stopped from returning.
Thank you. And Ms. Johnson, I'm going to start the next question with you. And I'm going to combine this with a question from one of our audience members. When you say that everyone needs to have health care, what do you plan to do to make everyone have adequate health care? And should Texas expand Medicaid eligibility?
Yes, Texas should expand Medicaid eligibility for sure. Nathan and I had a bill together to have done just that. It would have provided coverage for an additional 1 million people in the state under Medicaid eligibility. But we also have to make insurance work for people that they have it. I've authored a lot of bills in the House that would remove a lot of the barriers to care in terms of prior authorizations and a lot of things like that to be able to use the insurance that we have. That's another huge problem that we have in our healthcare system is it's very difficult to use the coverage that you have. We also have a third gap of uninsured folks, which is a lot of small businesses and independent employed people who don't have the ability to they're not eligible for Medicaid, they exceed the income requirements, but they also don't have the opportunity to pool their insured lives with a big risk pool in order to get more affordable rates. And that's a huge problem. And talking about, I think Senator Johnson and I were talking the other day about reforming the exchange programs, and I hope he'll be able to talk about that as well to help bring coverage to that segment of Texans also.
As a mother of four, I know that I take my children to the doctor to get them their regular routine healthcare check so that they do not get sick, and that saves us money. And that's to answer your question is if everybody's insured, they're able to do their routine healthcare checkup regularly, and they won't have to use the emergency room. Right now the power grid has spent a lot of money on uninsured, so that's a way to cut some savings.
We have 5 million uninsured people in Texas. Probably 2 million of them are unauthorized immigrants that would not be eligible for Medicaid in Texas. Another 2 million just can't afford health insurance, and about 1 million of them we could pick up with a Medicaid expansion. Julie and I have worked on it. I've spent about 2 million hours on this over the last couple of years. I've met with individual Republicans. We got almost enough to get it across. We may this session, we may not, but essentially Medicaid expansion would pay for itself. We would save and generate more revenue than we would spend in insuring the people. In addition, we would increase worker productivity, business productivity, draw down federal laws. I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer to expand Medicaid. The only credible argument against it is that it might cultivate a culture of dependence, which we don't want to do. But the fact is, you're actually cultivating independence when you give people health care because they're able to go work. And there's 38 states that have expanded that give us empirical evidence of that. There are other ways. I got 200,000 more people with free health insurance on the ACA marketplace by partnering with a Republican last session in the House. I'll be looking for more ways to help in this session.
We should not be expanding any of our government programs that are this costly. No, we want to have affordable healthcare in Texas. We want to have accessible healthcare. We want everyone to be able to have insurance. But what is the problem? The problem is bad practices and anti-competitive behavior by these insurance companies. We need regulation to break down that anti-competitiveness and allow for more access to private health insurance. That is going to be much better and much more comprehensive than what anything the government could provide. That's what we need to do. We do not need to be spending more money on this in the government. This is what got us into this inflationary issue in the first place, this over government spending. And so I think that we need to be reforming in the insurance regulation in order to allow for more competition and give people better options.
When you say everyone needs to have health care, what do you plan to do to make everyone have adequate health care? And should Texas expand Medicaid eligibility?
Well, a big component of my campaign, or I guess something that I continue to say, is health is wealth. Without your health, you pretty much can't do anything. Texas does have the highest uninsured rate. And I would be open to this, as this is something that I think would help out small business in terms of taking off the burden of them of having to ultimately provide insurance to these individuals. Another thing that I'd like to do is there are a lot of programs that are already available. I'd like to create task force and put them into these communities where these folks don't have insurance. I think there's a lot of opportunities there that individuals may not know that they are eligible for programs that exist. So I'd like to work with folks in the community and put together teams so we can reach out and work with the constituents in these communities to make sure that all the opportunities that are there, that they're actually utilizing them. Thank you.
I'm for Medicaid expansion. It's our dollars. We send it to the federal government. All we're doing is getting our own money back. Do you know we have the highest rate of uninsured of any state in the United States? Not only percentage-wise, but also actual raw numbers. We're the worst in insuring our population. This would help you too, because if you notice on your property tax bill, it includes Parkland Hospital. And if the Parkland Hospital can get back some of its money, that's typically called unreimbursed funds, if those can be reimbursed through Medicaid expansion, then it doesn't have to come from us. So it'd actually be a benefit to us personally in our property tax bills. It'll also be a benefit to rural areas. Rural counties, I know this from working on agriculture, it wasn't just about crops and cows, it was also about quality of life in rural areas. Small town hospitals are closing, and they have to drive for hours and hours. Can you imagine being sick and having to go long distances? So I think we can get some people on board for that too, to help the rural hospitals and small town hospitals.
One thing I'd like to see first of all is all type of healthcare reform. First of all, businesses pay so much of the cost of healthcare for their employees. People don't realize that. I work with some employees now. I'm lucky to have good insurance after 30 years with the company. It doesn't cost me as much as right now. It costs my employees $300 a paycheck every 2 weeks for their health care. They can't afford that, so they opt out of health care. When they're sick, they're sick because they just can't afford it. They need that money to pay their bills and to take care of their family. We need to make it cheaper or less expensive for our businesses to pay where they can pay their fair share, which they are right now, and the employee paying their fair share. Now, Medicaid, that's coming from the government, the federal government, and it's getting money back. A lot of people, it's tax money. They say, we don't want it. If it's handled right and distributed right and regulated properly, it's a good thing. I'm not saying just bring as much money, just do everything. We're having a hard time right now getting people to work as it is. And if you give away too much, it will still be hard to get employees to show up for work every day.
Thank you. I have a question from the audience. I'm going to start with Ms. Lee on this one. The question is, drought is becoming a critical issue in Texas. What do you plan to do about this during the next session?
Conserve water. You know. All right, be serious here. Water conservation is very important. Texas is arid and very dry, and in order to support the human and cattle and animals in our state, we have to ensure that we conserve water. Right now, I think that the Lake Ray project is great, but that's all I can say. Conserve climate change is real, and we just need to make sure that we conserve water. There are other ways that we can bring water in, but that's all I can say. Got to conserve.
Happily, we've reached a bipartisan, or rather a nonpartisan issue. If you trace the history of water in Texas, it's evolved from just drawing water out of rivers and wells to building reservoirs, and now we're going to have to go another step further. We're still going to build some reservoirs, but you run out of topographically suitable areas for water storage, and it's also extremely problematic to flood a bunch of private land. It's expensive, and it wrecks land that's been in families and towns for a long time. So one thing we're looking at is recharging aquifers by building new water infrastructure that captures the exceptional rainfall we have now. We have these long, awful droughts, and then we have these huge floods. Can we capture that water? Can we pump it into the ground? Can we restore some of the water that we've been pulling out before? We can, and there's other innovative things we're going to need to do, and that's going to require some state investment. If we don't make that state investment, we will pay for it later. I'm optimistic. I talked to my colleagues across the aisle on this. We don't even think about the aisle when we talk about this. It's just good policy.
This is a very serious issue. I think that we want everyone to have access to continued clean water. And as we have more people moving here and as we see those resources diminishing, that's very troubling. The Texas Water Board has put together a very comprehensive plan on this. I think that most people agree this is infrastructure that needs to be invested in. And I think that this is somewhere where we're going to have to take Texas tax dollars and put it towards making sure that we have water security for all Texans, especially those that live out in the more arid areas of Texas, where this crisis is already having a big impact. Thanks.
This isn't an issue I've really researched much. I guess, conservation is always very important. I've been to Cuba several times. That's where my father's family is at. And one thing that is big there is rain harvesting, teaching people how to conserve and maybe, it's a difficult issue. I think teaching people dependency or independency and teaching them things that they can do, just putting buckets out to collect rain and do things like that. They do go a long ways in terms of, especially with this drought that we saw this year, and we're actually still in it. So.
My freshman year was 2019. Once we're elected, we all of us freshmen go to Austin for freshman orientation, and they talk to us about a variety of issues. One luncheon, we had a demographer who was bragging about, and rightfully so, what a great attraction Texas is to people who want to come to our state and how many people we attract. And that's still true now, isn't it? Since 2019, even more so. And I was the only freshman who asked the question, but what about water? And he was actually glad that I asked the question because he had an answer and it's something he was very interested in to talk about. We can't continue to attract people to the state of Texas if we don't have water. And it's not something that's on the forefront of our minds, because when we go to our kitchen, bathroom, or wherever, and we turn on the faucet, water comes out. So we're not worried about it, but we should be worried about it. We can be on the brink of running out of water, and we need to take some action, some steps toward doing that. And Christina's not gonna let me finish all that, so time's up. Thank you.
Water is going to become one of the major issues in the whole United States, not just Texas. But the city of Irving's been lucky to have its own water supply for many, many years, and I've been able to work with that and learn about bringing water into the metropolitan area. We are getting so many people moving into our area. The water is just in a higher and higher demand every time. When we had the resident, well, look at what happened in Vegas and all the areas where they moved in and built metropolitan cities where there was no water. Now look at what's happening up there. There's no water anywhere. They're building where they shouldn't. Now, in the Dallas-Fort area, we're attracting more and more people. Our water supply is dwindling and dwindling. Irving's water supplies a couple years ago, we had to dig a channel out to the river just to get water. Now, Oklahoma has plenty of water. The water table replenishes itself 2 to 3 times in eastern Oklahoma. Try to get water from Oklahoma, they won't let it cross the Red River. So we have to work on ways. We need to build more reservoirs, which is taking land away, which we don't want to do, but we have to provide for the future like our leaders in Irving did years ago.
You know, fortunately, Biden's recent infrastructure bill addressed this issue in Texas and has deployed, I don't remember the exact number, but it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars to the state for water reservoir development. So that, and here in North Texas, I think 65 million of it is coming to develop a water reservoir, an additional one up here. As we have Cedar Creek Lake, we have different places that serve the water areas up there. So obviously, partnering with that, I think one of the things that the state can do is to help our cities and our local municipalities with the infrastructure to absorb additional water supplies in terms of additional water towers, treatment facilities, and those sorts of things, so that we can make sure that the cities that provide the water supply have the machines and the equipment necessary to intake and do more deep dive into desalination plants and so just a lot of other kind of water treatment programs. But water is going to be the #1 issue in Texas in the next 20 years for sure, and we have to prioritize it now.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, I'll start the next question with you. How should Texas support and regulate its energy industry? And what could we do to make our grid more reliable?
First, I would like to commend the efforts of the legislature last session. Much has been made about the fact that the grid isn't fixed yet, and that's true. It's not. It was incredibly difficult conditions. We had a group of legislators who don't specialize in grids having to solve the grid problem in 90 days. Nevertheless, there's a great deal we can do. Here's 3 things that we need to do. We need new power generation. We need emergency backup for the inevitable gigantic failure that will come someday. And we need conservation. You know, conservation has been estimated to possibly supply 7 or 8 gigawatts of electricity. That also is a financial program. Anything we do is going to cost money. We need to invest some in conservation. We're going to need to redesign our market so that it incentivizes technology neutral development of energy sources. It's probably for the next 10 years going to be gas-fired plants. There's some really cool modular engines that are out there, but there's batteries, there's hydrogen, there's even hydro potential energy. So market redesign, make sure we still have our backup facilities. Segmentation of electrical feeders. Can I have 5 more minutes?
Sorry. I can also talk about this for 5 minutes. But the strain on our grid is getting significantly worse. I mean, as was mentioned earlier, we have many people moving to Texas, and not only that, we have many businesses coming here and new industries being brought here, all of which are putting significant strain on our grid. And in the past few months, we've continued to see ERCOT under-projecting what the demand actually is. Demand is outpaced. And it will continue to do that, especially when you have industries like crypto mining and things like that coming on board, where one mining facility is pulling more energy than all of the city pool, right? And so what we need to do is update our power generation facilities that we have,
We need to open up Texas for more energy companies to come here and develop, whether it's natural gas or nuclear or solar or wind. And we need to be incentivizing people for businesses to come here and help solve this problem.
I think one of the easiest things that we could do is we could, make sure that we meet the national standards in terms of the winterization of the grids. Also, it would be good to have some type of oversight committee made up of both the public and private sector who are overviewing and meeting regularly to make sure that we don't have another catastrophe like we had several years ago. Also in favor of just having various forms of energy. Like how I'm running independent to provide options. I'm not sure why there's an issue with having various options in terms of forms of energy that we're producing. So I think those are several of the things that I would do as state rep. Thank you.
I attended the meetings. They had the joint committees to discuss the issue. I talked to some of my colleagues who worked on those joint committees and told them that I had a concern that what we were going to do about it was that we were just going to do enough to look like we did something without really doing something. And I'm kind of worried that that's what happened. I especially wanted to attend because one of the corporations right here at Irving in my district, Vistra, was testifying. Kurt, I can't remember his last name, sorry, it sounds so familiar, but Kurt testified and he was brutally honest about the problem, about how interconnected the two are, that he can't supply until they supply him. It's a circle that way. They have no motive or motivation to increase the supply when they could just charge us more money. They could keep the supply at the same amount and just charge us more. And that's what happened. And you had high bills, and now they're passing on that to us. We need to do weatherization. We need to do a lot of other things to improve our electrical grid, and I'm looking forward to being able to do the things that we didn't do last session to fix our electrical grid.
I agree. One thing we do have to do is diversify. When you have a major winter storm like we had last time, solar doesn't work and our wind generation wasn't working. We can't always count on hydro because we don't know how the river's going to be. We don't know if there's going to be enough water. We have to diversify where no matter what the weather conditions are or what's going on, we have an adequate amount of electricity produced to handle the loads that we have across the state of Texas. And we have to be prepared this time. We always have to be prepared. But if we know something's going to happen, don't just wait. And then we have several other companies just waiting to come online with that higher price. We need to have our system ready to go to supply the residential and commercial needs of electricity everybody needs.
To kind of tap on further what Senator Johnson was saying, our market structure does not reward or encourage new generation. That is crazy. Where else in, what other business industry in our culture do we have where you're not rewarded for producing more items, producing more cars, producing more widgets, producing more something? The structure of our gas price market does not encourage new generation. It encourages exactly that, a higher price, just charging more for the supply that you have. So we have to really take a good look at that. One of the things that I did this past session was file a transparency bill where the ERCOT meetings would be subject to freedom of information request. Ken Paxton ruled that they're secret and the public doesn't have a right to know, and I think that's wrong. I think we should have transparency in government so that we can understand what's going on, so that the public can see, so that we can really see kind of where the holes are. I think that's another issue that we need to have in this industry.
Conserve is the way to go. I think that we need to listen to our expert. There are reports out there on how to fix the grid, and we need to do it.
Okay, Vince, I want to thank you all so much. We have come to a point where we are going to take your closing statements. We had so many questions from the audience. I'm sorry that we're not going to get around to all of them. I didn't even get around to all of our questions. But at this time, we're going to stop and we'll have a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate. And Mr. Copeland, I'll start with you.
We're facing many critical issues in our state, in our country. And I think it's going to take a bipartisan effort on many of them. You've heard that here tonight. I think you've also heard that the best solutions come when we challenge each other's ideas. And the thing that we need right now is representatives that can work across the aisle, that can work with their colleagues and actually get legislation passed, like on securing, fixing the grid. This is something that should be easy to do. I am an engineer. I'm not a lawyer. Everything that I've done in my career is solving problems. And that's what I plan to do when I get to the legislature, is solve problems and take into consideration every perspective in all sides, because that's how we create the best legislature.
Well, I feel like I have to close with this. I went to Austin last year to testify in support of legislation that would have allowed children equal access to both fit and able parents. It was myself and hundreds of others, parents, children, mental health professionals, you name it, the gamut was there. There was a lobby there called the Texas Family Law Foundation. And their clients are family law attorneys. And there was roughly about 8 of them that were there testifying in opposition to this legislation. What the science says is best for children when parents divorce and separate is to maximize the time that children have with both fit and able parents. This is not about mother versus father. This is not about red versus blue. This is about protecting the most vulnerable in our state of Texas, the children. So let's make sure that the only individuals that are being crowned here in Texas are our kids. Thank you.
Sometimes it feels like I've knocked on every door in Irving at this point, because I've been knocking doors since like 2013. And I've learned a lot from talking to people at their doors. The reason why I ran, because I felt like we weren't being well represented. I mean, after all, it's right there in the title, representative. We're supposed to represent. And we had someone that felt totally comfortable going to Austin and voting against us. So we were successful finally in 2018, one of 12 flip seats in the state of Texas. Worked very hard to win this seat. And I think I've also worked very hard as your state rep to talk to you some about the committees I serve on: agriculture, public ed, human services, resolutions. And that work extends into the summer. And I drive down to Austin pretty much every month this year. There's been a trip to Austin. So I would like to continue to serve and represent you. I love Irving. I love this district. And I hope that you'll allow me to continue to serve and represent you. I'm very proud of Irving. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out here tonight and listening to us and taking time off your evening. I also love this city. I'll tell you, I've served the city for over 21 years. I've gotten to know the city very well. I have. I'm not just running for this, not knowing what's going on. It would be new in the state level. It was always a learning experience. But I took the time, 16 years on Irving City Council, to learn what the city needs from the state of Texas, what's going to help the citizens of our city. And one thing I've done for the past 21 years has been very involved, and I've been very active within the city. I try to attend 3 to 4 different events per week, not just because I'm running for election. I like it because I like to hear from the people that are here in Irving. And believe me, they tell me what their concerns are. And it's nice to be able to help people out. And I want to continue what I'm doing, helping people out and fighting for the residents of Irving and Austin. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much for being here, for allowing this great conversation. The free flow of ideas and having the citizens have the opportunity to ask questions is part of the process. And forums like this are very, very important. I'm honored to serve House District 115. I'm proud to stand for re-election. proud of the work I've been able to do, but there's so much yet to achieve. And I hope that the voters will send me back to be able so that I can continue to work on some of these issues that we discussed tonight, but obviously education and healthcare funding are two of the most important for me. But it's a privilege to serve, and it's one of the biggest honors one can have, and I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously, and I look forward to winning this election and serving you again in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for bearing with me. I am new at this. I do appreciate your consideration and vote this November. I know that I am inexperienced, but I do have the heart, and I believe that the freedom is the backbone of our democracy. And this democracy is a representative government, and in order to do that, we got to get the voices of people back to government.
Thank you all for being here and being engaged in the civic process. I think one of the things our state needs is more people to ask more questions for themselves and other legislators. I think more people should know that Medicaid expansion doesn't cost a lot of money. It actually pays for itself. You know, look it up and talk to me after class. I'd be happy to. It's that kind of approach I would like to bring to the legislature. Empirical politics, not partisan politics, empirical politics. And a lot of the people that I work with to get things done, we do set aside demagoguery, because demagoguery doesn't work. And we've been doing that for far too long. Let's go in with our eyes open, let's look at the numbers, and let's legislate like people who care, but let's do it with our eyes wide open. I think there's so much progress we can make in this state. We've got capital, we've got natural resources, we've got entrepreneurial spirit, we've got endless great people in this state that can do great things. If we are willing to commit ourselves to building the structure in which individuals and businesses can thrive, and that's an active role for all of us. So I want to be part of it. I'd like you all to be part of it too.
Well, thank you all to all of the candidates very much. We've heard some differing opinions on how to solve the challenges we face in Texas, but appreciate the civil discourse. And we thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and plans with us. And best of luck to each of you in your campaigns. And I want to turn to the audience and say thank you all for being such an attentive audience. And remember to vote. Early voting starts October 24th and runs through November 4th, and Election Day is November 8th. And if you'd like some more information, please visit vote411.org or dallascountyvotes.org, and you can find a lot of information here also on our League of Women Voters table, and the candidates also have some information in the back room. And let's please give a round of applause to our candidates for the